Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session, The Talent Economy, today's hiring and recruiting landscape in financial Marcomms. We have a full house today. We have about 80 attendees registered for today's webinar, and we're so glad you joined us, and we really think you're going to enjoy the event today. I'm Vanessa Sussman. I'm head of corporate comms for private markets at Nuveen, the 1.2 trillion asset manager of TIAA. And I'm excited to introduce you to our speaker today, Susan Thomas with Heyman Associates. Susan leads financial Marcomms recruiting for Heyman and has worked with high-level financial service professionals for 20 plus years. Thank you so much for being here today, Susan.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
We are very happy to have you here. So to start, do you want to just tell us a little bit about the type of work that you do and who you tend to work with, just to set the stage?
Yeah, sure. So maybe I should give a little bit of background as well, since I think it's relevant. So I came from financial services search. So I started out in financial services, first in the fixed income market, sales and trading, and then in investment banking, M&A, corporate finance, and then went into search for financial services. But I had always intended to go to a master's in communications, got sidetracked, and so then came full circle and actually started in communications search in Asia, in Hong Kong, which is where I joined Heyman. We had a joint venture in Asia, and then ultimately I'm now based in New York. And then the other thing I should mention is that I started my career in the States in '98 and then just had that short stint in Asia. So the bulk of my search experience has been in the United States. And as I said, I started out in the financial services side, which meant that I was looking at all roles across just that sector. So it was investment banking, private equity, asset management, fund management. And now, of course, I'm looking just at the profession, communications profession and marketing communications profession across all industries across the United States. And I say industries, we also are nonprofit and then higher ed. So what we're usually doing is either the most senior role. So we're often working with the CEO or global CHRO, looking for the very head of the communications function. Or a marketing communications function, or we're looking for the next layer down, so the people who report into that individual. So, for example, a couple of years ago, we were working with the global CCO of a big bank, looking for 4 of the direct reports to that global CCO of the 8 that individual has for a 300-person team. So it's a perfect example. But we don't just do that. We do slightly lower down as well. And that will come to us if we're working with organizations. We perhaps know them very well, and they come to us sometimes persuading us to please help with more junior roles, because it's just incredibly difficult to search at that level as well.
Well, perfect. Well, your expertise is perfect for this group. So the talent world in the past 12 months seems like it's been a little crazy, including a talent shortage. There's been layoffs. On the other side, there's extremely high salary offers. Could you tell us a little bit on what you've been seeing and really what the market looks like today?
Yeah, it's really interesting. The expression creative chaos comes to mind, because I think you've got some juxtaposition that on the one hand, as you said, there's a dearth of talent. There seems consistently to be a dearth of talent in certain places. There have been areas that have been of particular interest to organizations to grow, specifically, I would say in the last year, content, digital comms. It makes some sense, obviously. But for financial services as a whole, I would say that last year was busy, the year before that busier, and then we are expecting this to be a slightly softer year for financial services, and we're already seeing that certain other sectors, namely higher education and healthcare, are really busy right now. It's really interesting. And then obviously technology, not so busy at the moment. That said, I think what we'll see this year again with financial services will be specific roles that all organizations are struggling to fill, areas of expertise. And what I don't want to go sort of into too much detail in any particular area, but one of the problems will be that you're looking for individuals who combine multiple areas of expertise, which is very difficult to find. So for example, market analytics roles, finding somebody who can be highly strategic and then is really adept in analytics and is not too senior is challenging. I think that's what we'll continue to see in financial services, if not elsewhere as well, is these very specific roles that everybody is struggling to find the right person for. It's not that the skills don't exist, it's often that they don't exist in one individual having multiple areas of expertise.
And the right fit, right.
And the right fit.
Yeah, so our audience is made up of high-level financial Marcomms professionals. What trends are you seeing within hiring in the financial Marcomms industry?
Well, I think, again, what we're seeing, and I think this reflects what we see elsewhere, invariably what we're doing, kind of bluntly, is perhaps an upgrade. I think, we've seen this in the press, that organizations were caught off guard during the pandemic, and invariably it was a stress test for some organizations, whether or not they were fully equipped. Did they have just a purely reactive function, or did they have a proactive function? And that's often dependent on the leader, whether they were well equipped and whether they were able to navigate the entire situation adeptly or not. So that's one thing I think that some organizations have woken up to. We don't have who we need in place. And that actually, I think that historically, financial services has looked for the kinds of people that now other organizations are looking for as well, which is people with a little bit of a policy background or some Washington background, just a different form of navigation and different ability to deal with media relations and crises. So I think you'll see a little bit of that, a little bit of upgrading to a more proactive, more strategic individual. And we could talk more about that later, because that relates to how do you think about your career as you go forward, developing the portfolio that's your career if you're really interested in getting into leadership positions. And then the other trend we've seen is the other end of the scale, which is, as I said, people struggling with with recruiting at the junior level. Excuse me. So financial services, some of I would say the legal profession as well, have struggled a little bit to attract the same number of individuals, perhaps not into communications so much, but across the board in their organizations. So we're seeing a ripple effect for that. And again, I would say lots of people struggling to find the sort of 7 to 12 years is maybe even 7 to 15 years in some cases.
Mm. And you touched upon this a little bit, but where are you seeing the most demand for talent, especially just in terms of specific industries or skill sets that are most particularly in demand?
I would say we're still seeing across the board. So if you think of all of the different functions within, all of the different verticals within communications and within marketing communications, I'd say that it's pretty much across the board. But as I said, we've also seen more interest. Marketing analytics has generally been, or analytics of insights, content, that could sit in marketing or communications, depending on the organization. And we are seeing a greater appetite for that in communications, dedicated to communications versus just borrowing that capability from marketing or leaving it in marketing. So that would be one thing. Content, and I think content, so not just the measurement, but the actual production of content. What we have seen is that organizations who didn't need to really have a voice in a prolific way now realize they do. And so there's been hiring in that regard as well. And then that, I think, digital communications is a development of that as well.
Right. I know we've been reading a lot in the news given the current economic climate. Have you been seeing hiring freezes in financial services and specifically with Marcomms?
Yeah, so we have not, but we're not, those organizations that are coming to us are the ones that are still hiring. So of course, it could well be the case, and we're just not hearing from those organizations who are in that place. And we're certainly not hearing that from people who We have a lot of inbound inquiries as well. And that hasn't been something that people have been saying to us. It's really interesting, actually. I was on a panel last year, and there's a lot that comes out in the press that we think, that's really interesting. We're not seeing that.
Well, that's great. That's great. You know, we've discussed that you're seeing an increased focus on DEI hiring. Who's doing this well? What does doing this well kind of mean based on your experience? If you could kind of touch upon that a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the first things is you need to have been doing it at all. You need to have had a function, a proactive function for a while. That will be the first reason that people are doing it well, because they can speak to having had a commitment to this as opposed to having only developed it in the last few years. So you really want to have a history. If you don't have a history, you have an uphill struggle, I think. You've got to form a very different narrative about how you're changing your organization to make sure that DE&I is a priority. The next thing will be that it doesn't start and end with making sure that you have a diverse slate of candidates. How are you receiving those candidates and integrating them in the organization? How are they included, especially in financial services and certain areas of financial services where we haven't seen great diversity over a long period of time? I mean, I would give a specific example of individuals who have found it very difficult. Individuals who've come from, who are from a diverse background, and they've gone into organisations, and I think they feel a little bit that they have been hired very specifically for this reason. And I gave the example of a friend who went through this process of sort of pushing back a little bit and saying, "What will my team be if you want me to lead DE&I? What is our commitment to that?" And sort of quizzical glances back to say, "Oh, we haven't really thought to that next step. We just want to make sure that we have someone who's spearheading this to begin with." So that's the next thing is what is your plan? How is this part of the fabric of your organization? It needs to be who you are as an organization. And some organizations are behind on this, and some are doing, as I said, a fantastic job. They've been doing it for a long time. It was always a priority. It existed in the vision of the leadership because they understood the benefits of that. They understood that this was really important, how it reflects society. And then they realized as well that it didn't stop with hiring, that they had to make sure that inside their organization there was every kind of support they could think of, and they really involved everybody in that decision making. So being careful of sitting in the ivory tower thinking that what people will want, and rather ask, what's needed, what's missing.
Yeah, I know at our company at TIAA and Nuveen, we really try to kind of build diversity into our hiring process and everything that we do throughout the company. So it is, I know it's a huge initiative where I'm working, and hopefully other companies can get it right as well. So a lot of people in our audience are responsible for hiring both junior and senior talent. Could you talk a little bit about the challenges of hiring junior talent? And I know you mentioned earlier that it is hard to kind of find those right fits with junior talent, but would just love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's always difficult to be really general, not least because our searches are often so specific. But I would say that the challenges that we saw were asking for so much experience and yet in a junior individual. And actually, it's been a very positive outcome because we've been really partnering with organizations, with our clients, and saying, okay, well, we can go and look for that, but this, bear in mind that you're not necessarily going to get everything that you've written into this job description. But what we'll do is we'll take that job description out to market, and we'll see what happens, because what will most likely happen if you've got this smorgasbord of skills that you want someone to have is that they'll be attracted to the opportunity to be able to develop all of those in all of those areas. And I think in a way, anybody who sort of self-selects out of that hasn't got the appetite for that kind of environment where they might be pulled in any direction. So that would be one of the first challenges, is asking for too much too early in one individual. And actually that can continue, even up to I'd say sort of 12 to 15 years. The next challenge, well, obviously there's a challenge of individuals being called by lots of organizations. The challenge we had last year was that we found ourselves approaching people who had been on board in their current organizations too short a time. We couldn't find people who had been, ordinarily you would look and think, oh, you've been there for 3 years, maybe you would consider a move now. And we were being asked to approach people who had not been on board a year. The amount that people are moving is a challenge. Then you have another challenge after that. If you do introduce somebody, this is fine for the communications people who first meet these individuals. They understand that communications professionals, in order to develop a portfolio of skills, need to move organization. They can't always get that portfolio of skills inside one organization, especially financial services, where the function is not necessarily large. And you might be spread too thin to be getting, depth of expertise. But what happens is when they interview with the actual financial services professionals who do tend to sit still for a long time, the feedback will be, gosh, you've moved so much. And so we've chuckled a little bit and had to sort of counsel our communications clients to please talk to the financial services professionals about the difference in those career paths and why they need to think differently about how they address the fact that someone has moved several times.
Right, there's a lot of movement. And so for those who are in the audience right now who are seeking new roles, what advice would you give them at this time?
Again, it would depend on why. If you're trying to develop expertise that you can't develop in your current situation, I think that's strategically a really good reason to look at other opportunities. The challenge with that is that if you don't have that expertise, then the recruitment professionals are not seeing you and finding you. So you need to declare that somewhere on your LinkedIn or in your resume so that gets picked up in a Boolean, which is, a difficult thing in and of itself. I think it so depends on why you're looking. If it is that you have developed all the expertise and you feel as if you're ready for the next role, that as well is another thing. So now you have everything that you need in order for people to pick you up and see that you would make a next best leader in another organization. And then that becomes about old-fashioned networking, I think, reaching out to executive search firms that will actually talk to you about your career, and hearing, just putting yourself on their radar is a good idea. And then it's a tricky one. I think that one of the things I feel, and I don't know if this is the section at which we discuss it, but I think that it really is thinking about, who am I as a leader? So if I'm looking for a leadership position, what skills have I developed so far? Become really, really self-aware about, what do I see in other people that I don't necessarily think that I've developed in myself. People are looking for, we look for this, and our clients look for this. There's so much to leadership. There is your ability to be visionary. There's your ability to be strategic. There's your ability to be someone who can also implement. You can't just be, the person with the good ideas who can't implement them. That's an often complaint and often a reason we are replacing somebody, or the other way around. Great at implementing, not a strategic thinker. The thinking part is an important part of this. Do you know who you are as a thinker, how you think, really, that's about problem solving, but it's more than that. It is that strategic visionary part as well. And then who you are dispositionally. Who are you? We hear these requests a lot. Who is this individual? Think about, very senior level leadership positions in communications and marketing. You are working horizontally across the entire organization. You need to be able to operate cross-functionally with the heads of all of the divisions, and you need to be understanding enough about their world to be bringing that information back to your team, translating it into strategy and implementation. And then meanwhile, you need to be developing your own team as well, making sure that they're all rising in their own careers. It's a lot.
It's a lot, as you're saying this. Is there anything else before we move on to questions, Susan, that we missed, that you wanted to touch upon?
No, I don't think so.
Well, we have, I'd love to open up the floor to questions from the audience. So for those of you who haven't already, please put some questions you have in the chat and we'll pull them from there. And I think we have one that I think Melissa Cantor. Hi, Melissa. Hope everything is going well. Put. So we have a question here. Are certifications necessary for Marcom leaders who are looking for a new role? I.e. DEI, for example, DEIB, digital comms, etc.
Yes, we're doing digital communications role at the moment where it's preferred if you have SEC FINRA qualifications, current licenses, but even if they're out of date, that's fine. But the sheer fact that you've done them is a huge advantage. So if you're in a pool of candidates and you have got your licenses, you will definitely stand out against other candidates. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's a great to have.
Great.
A lot of organizations are looking for really keen understanding of the regulatory environment. And, you know, ideally, if you haven't got your licenses, you at least need to be able to demonstrate that you've worked closely with legal and that you're completely fluent in that regard.
Great. We have another question which came in. In terms of what you just said about needing to do everything in a senior role, do you have which a lot of us feel all the time, do you have suggestions on how to approach this and then manage each of those functions, as a lot of Marcom professionals are working horizontally, as you mentioned, kind of across with different functions across the organization?
How to approach that leadership role?
I think suggestions on just kind of how to manage it as a Marcom professional. Maybe that's not really a hiring. Let's see.
Right.
Mostly how to manage it.
Interesting. Yeah,
and
that's
managing expectations.
Okay. Yeah. That's a very good question. I think that's a longer conversation, isn't it? I think that this is where you you use your communication skills to manage expectations throughout the organization. Being proactive has got to be the most important thing. Setting expectations, helping people. I mean, I don't know whether I'd be really interested to have a conversation with the person who's asking the question, because I think, what issues are you seeing specifically, or what's the stretch, what's the difficulty that you perceive? Because I think that I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it is, gosh, I'm trying to think what the percentage would be of times when we feel, gosh, this organization doesn't necessarily really understand their communications function. And they don't really understand communications. And so you have, you have so many jobs. You have to demonstrate value, but you also have to educate, I think. So at the same time as you're demonstrating value to your leadership, you can't demonstrate that without first having them really understand what it is you do and what the impact of what you do is and how that really affects the organization. Frankly, that's where I would go in financial services in particular. Bring statistics if you can. If you use RepTrack or anything like that, talk about how that's affecting the bottom line. I think in financial services in particular, if you can talk to that impact, I mean, it works for corporates as well.
And promoting ourselves. We're always promoting the company, but finding a way to promote the work that we're doing through metrics.
Yeah. I think you raise a really important point, because I think this is where often when we speak to people, we say sort of, okay, now's the time where you develop your own brand narrative. You've really got to be able to, it's grandstanding you specifically, but it's also grandstanding the profession that you are in and what that does for an organization. So yes, it's about maybe start as you look at sort of, my goodness, I've got to go completely horizontally. Then I have to manage this team. That could be a large team. I am really stretched, in a million different directions, and I'm expected to be an expert in so many different areas. Probably only the CEO has the same level of sort of horizontal vision and touch across the organization, right? So I think, maybe just start with going inside a little bit and thinking, okay, let me remind myself first what my strengths are. What are the strengths of a really strong communicator? What can I do that other people can't do? Where am I translating? Where am I interpreting? Where am I the buffer? Where am I where am I running interference between different organizations? And I think that you might find that you are doing more that is unidentified, unspoken than you realize, and finding voice for that, finding a narrative for that could be really important in terms of having people understand the support that you need.
That's great advice. We have a really interesting question that just came in about there's been an influx in sustainability roles over the past few months. Are you seeing it too in Marcomms? And
Yes.
kind of with the focus on, specific to financial services with an increase in ESG and responsible investing practices.
Yes, absolutely. So I run, in addition to, we all work across all industries and nonprofit and higher ed as well. But in addition to focusing on financial services, I do our investor relations searches as well. And it has become a must-have to have sustainability and ESG experience. So yeah, that's been a trend for a couple of years, and it continues.
We're certainly we're seeing that at our company for sure. It definitely, as you were saying, kind of adding on different skill sets. That's certainly one I agree with.
Yeah, and sadly, historically, I feel as if communications has been the part of the organization with where if people don't know where to put it, they're going to come to you.
Right. Yes. So as you were saying, how we're familiar and aware and have to be experts on everything. That's definitely something.
To come back to your previous question, that would be a place where you'd need to say, okay, so this is great. So I already had a full-time job and you're giving me a new project. That's fantastic. And just as, my close friend said when she was asked if she would head DE&I, what are my resources for this? What are our resources as an organization? How are we going to address this? This is not a sort of now I am going to address this. So I think it is a place to sort of just push back a little bit.
Right. Another question came in. Are you seeing a push to recruit Gen Z millennials in order to have more of those perspectives on your team? And I know we also spoke about junior talent. So what are you seeing?
Yes, I think so. I think that so we're not often recruiting at that level, but of course we've got the soundbite of what people are trying to do in their groups. I can think of other recruitment agencies that would probably have a much better perspective on that than I will. But I think that what we hear from our clients about the difficulty they have recruiting, this is across financial services, not communications. So this is about their graduate recruitment, their MBA recruitment, that they really value the perspective that these generations are bringing. That it's very difficult because they want you to be perfect. They want you, the organization, to be perfect. They want you to have arrived at the place that they are at in terms of what they are adopting as priorities for the planet, for themselves. And often the organization is not there. And so they're coming with this checklist to say, do you do this? And how will this be handled? Because I want to work for an organization that is like this. I shared that one global CCO shared with us that for that, so if you think about getting asked from marketing and communications also being asked to help with recruitment, helping to help across everything that will help with that ESG, DEI, can be falling to marketing and communications right now as well in order to help with recruitment, because what they're seeing in the recruitment function, I don't know if this is, so my information on this is now a year old, but what they were finding was that they simply couldn't recruit the same caliber of individual that they had been recruiting previously. So they had been in the driving seat, they had been very much the buyer, and they were having to move to selling to candidates to come and join them. And they were having to drop down a couple of levels, be it the university that they're recruiting from or the other organization that they are poaching from. Really interesting.
That is interesting. We have a great question from Catherine. Are there trends you're seeing companies look for in their more senior C-suite roles in terms of experience or specifically the directions that they're looking to take the company?
Are we talking about C-suite comms, or are we talking about the C-suite leadership, CEO, CFO, COO, etc.?
Comms.
Comms specifically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yes.
CMO roles.
Yes.
CMC roles.
Yes. So as I said, if ever the strategic mindset, the visionary mindset were in demand, I think it's now. So I think that that wasn't necessarily the case. This is again, these are crass generalizations, but if you think about some of the roles that we're called to fill, for example, you could have, I'll give an example of a corporate, not a financial services organization, for example, that they have had someone in a role for 20 years, and that is someone who's grown with the organization. So imagine what their corporate communications experience is compared to somebody who's moved through several organizations, and the benefits of having somebody who is kind of really has seen a lot more, has learned from a lot more people, has a greater diversity of experience across different organizations. And actually what we're seeing is that some of the CCOs who've have been in these roles for a long time are seeing it themselves. They're feeling it. They're feeling that I'm not equipped. I literally don't have the experience to do what it is to guide us through what we're going through right now. And then think about what's happening, that the organization is coming from the CEO and the global CHRO are coming to us and saying, find us this person. So look at the importance of that role, and then think about, who do I need to be? And I think you look to your CEO's skills. I think that you look to, what does my CEO have to think about? Or what does the CEO of this organization have to think about on a daily, weekly, quarterly, annual basis? And how will I be reflecting that? Who can I be from a communications perspective? Because really your communications professionals are supposed to be one step ahead. They're supposed to be seeing around corners and coming back to you and reporting what is going on. So this is high demand indeed. And so I think really more than ever, we are seeing an extraordinary amount of leadership skills being demanded of our communications and marketing professionals. As I think I mentioned it all earlier, it's about being strategic, it's about being visionary, but it's about also knowing how to implement on all of that, how to translate the information that you're finding into great implementation, and then measure it and do it again.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned kind of wearing the hat of the CEO and being one step ahead, as well as maybe even the chief commercial officer, the head of sales, to really kind of align the goals of comms with the growth. There are a lot of leadership hats I think that we need to wear. We have a question that came in. How do you position yourself as a team leader and manager if you haven't managed large teams? So if you haven't managed a team with 15 people or more in the past. And this person said, I found that experience managing 4 to 5 people isn't significant enough for large multinational corporations, organizations. How could you best position yourself in that case, given you haven't had the experience of managing larger teams? It's
really true that will be a difficult transition. I mean, this is like trying to transition from agency into in-house, that there are very different skills and someone has to take a leap of faith. So and unfortunately, historically, teams at a lot of financial services organizations, not all, have been small. And so the opportunity to build, I have seen people kind of stuck in the industry and in their careers because of a lack of experience managing large groups, large teams. And indeed, we're often looking for people who've got 9 to 10 direct reports, let alone their entire team, which can go into the hundreds. It's stepping stones. I think you've got to, and again, it would be about really crafting your narrative around, who am I for those few reports that I do have? How have I developed them? And what is my appetite for, we do listen intently to those people who are saying, I really love managing, I would like to manage bigger teams. And if your other skills, if you can't get that expertise and experience in your current organization, then just make sure that everything else is being developed so well that that is your one growth area, that is the area that essentially people are going to take on a risk on, but also be really keenly aware of what your narrative is around those individuals you have managed. And then the other thing you can leverage, frankly, is probably those people who you are being led by and their skills and what you have learned in the process that you would very much like to take to the next organization. Beyond that, I think that you have to look externally, get coaching. You know, there are ways of going and developing yourself. A lot of leadership comes from disposition. It isn't actually all experience. And some of it is about working on you, the individual. We all have heard stories of difficult individuals in very senior roles. And there is a wonderful Argentinian professor at Columbia University who talks about, you know, how very incompetent people can reach very, very high roles quite successfully. And so I think that you can do some work yourself before even thinking about practicing, you know, those skills on other people. So for example, I mean, it might seem a little bit hokey, but if your answer to your leadership experience is, well, I have only managed, you know, 4 to 5 people to date, but I have actually been working on my leadership skills through the following methods.
That's great. We have a question came in. What does it mean if you're turned down for a role because you're not a quote unquote cultural fit?
Interesting.
Any thoughts on if you've experienced that?
Yes. Yes, we do. And it's a really inexact science. You know, that's really where it's something that we'll quite often guess. It's a fun part of our role, I think, is, you know, do we think this person will be a fit based on the little bit of information that we have and we don't work at this organization? And that cultural fit, if you think about it, am I a cultural fit with the communications function and or am I a cultural fit with the organization? Because they can be very different things inside one organization. Even departmentally, you can see different cultures. So I think what it means is that that there is a specific way of being that the organization values. And if you feel that, you know, it's a wonderful opportunity for really good feedback. Ask them to use really specific language about what is important to them in terms of how an individual behaves or thinks. That is, you know, of great importance to them. This is a difficult one. I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit here and notice if you've been in one organization for a long time, notice the degree to which you will pick up the cultural behaviors of that organization. You might. If you don't, you would be finding it either, you know, very comfortable or uncomfortable because you're still detached from it to a certain extent. If you are in it and you don't know you're in it, it will be transparent to you that you have adopted a certain style of communication in particular. Are you more direct than this other organization likes, or are you not direct enough? You know, so this is where you really could ask for very specific language, but I think it's so many different things that will make up a culture fit or not.
Yes,
that's another very specific conversation, I think. I don't think you can generalize about that.
Right. And not without knowing the details too, but thank you for answering that. We've got a great question from Joe Stoiter. Professional development is a huge focus of mine for our comms team this year for retention purposes, which is great. Which skill sets do you think should be at the top of the list for comms teams who want to retain talent? Do you have any
so I'm a huge fan of personal and professional development. So I have an ontological coaching background, and so I'm just heartened that anybody is really focusing on this. So one thing is really listening to them, to what do they want, what do they see that they want to do next, if you can find people's passion, you'll get the very best out of them. And I know it's like a crass generalization, the finding the passion, but it's just about sort of where do they light up, around which particular skills do they light up a little bit more than others, and then which are they not doing that you can see that they sort of think, well, that looks interesting. And I think you do them a great service if you let them learn different functions within that, as a way I think that you can keep people on the team. I think that is somewhere that you're going to lose people if you can't offer them the opportunity to go across different areas. We were working with a big team recently who were hiring sort of the 2 deputies to the CCO, and somebody had applied internally and was lacking 2 areas of expertise for that role, and couldn't even, had tried applying for the CMCO role, and told, sorry, there are 4 buckets, you're lacking 2 of them, and then realized that that individual couldn't even apply for the AVP role, but then said, okay, so then I get to learn from whoever comes in, and was excited about the opportunity to learn. So make sure you're giving everybody the opportunity to learn to get to the next level for their career. That's about the function. And then I think it's a case of, as we just discussed, talking to people about who they are dispositionally and what's difficult for them, what they want to stretch into, what they don't see themselves. Some people don't want to develop across the board and become, you know, the great leader. So where would they like to specialize if that's what they would prefer? Is that a good answer?
I think that's a great answer. And a tough one too.
I'll add one more thing. Encourage them to take ownership of their own professional development as well. Don't look just to your employer to develop you professionally, but, you know, encourage them to own that themselves. It's their journey.
Yeah, I agree, and even see if your company can also supplement, help you, but to find those, the ones that, because there are so many different resources out there, to find ones that are going to work for you.
Yeah.
So we have a question that came in from an attendee. After 8 successful interviews, I sat with the CEO for 30 minutes, and the next day I was told the chemistry was not there. No additional information was shared. It was tough. That does sound tough.
Oh, that's making me cringe. Yeah.
Yes.
It's so hard. So hard.
Start next time. We can start with the CEO instead of going up, go down. Make sure it's back to the cultural fit questions.
Yeah, back to the cultural fit. And you know what? That is not unusual for a CEO to be the person who's literally going to do a gut check, because they can't think deeply. They don't have the time to be literally going through a checklist of, you know, they assume that all of that has been done in the other 8 interviews. Right. And so for them, it really is I don't know whether this individual knows how many people got to the CEO. We have a conversation with clients about this quite often. How valuable is it for the hiring manager proper, whoever was managing that search on a day-to-day basis inside the organization, and it's about the search firm as well, giving advice. What is the value in the CEO meeting 2 people versus you owning this search and presenting your successful candidate? Because you have this problem again. We've just had a call about exactly this problem, where the CEO and the global CHRO found a candidate they loved, and the board turned down the candidate.
Wow.
We have been called, it's a search that was unsuccessful, and we've been asked to take it on to carry it on. And with this backdrop that the board has turned down the individual. Luckily, we knew the individual, and while really, really talented, I could understand the board's feedback. So this is a difficult one, because there's 3 places where the conversation needs to be constant and good. The search firm, the organizer, and assuming there was a search firm involved, there might not have been, but if not the search firm, then the talent acquisition professionals. Ask early. I get the only thing that comes to mind about that is ask early about the CEO. What kind of individuals does he enjoy? Who does he connect? Who does she connect with? Who's she? Excellent. Who does she? No bias there. Who does she really connect with in the organization? What does she? sorry, I'm jumping around because this is a difficult one. We prep our candidates before every meeting in an organization, and we insist that the hiring manager tell us about those individuals that our candidates are going to meet. It simply isn't appropriate that you go, in our opinion, that you go in blind. You should know the preferences of this individual, who they are in the organization, who they get along with really well, what they value. And you should also know sort of who they are personally, because they already know a lot about you. So to my mind, and I would say that the best feedback that we get is, you prepared me so well. It was exactly as you said it would be. They were exactly as you said they would be. Or even if they say, and this is rare, but even if they say, it simply wasn't what you said it was, because usually it's because I've tried to warn them about something that I think will be tricky, because often we are recruiting because there is a tricky C-suite or a tricky board, and we need somebody who can navigate this, and we're recruiting for exactly that kind of person, someone who can navigate difficult situations and help that organization to a different place. So ask early. If the search firm or the talent acquisition partner is not offering this information, ask for it. Say, can I please be prepped before, and make the point. As I understand it, they'll have a lot of information about me. I will not have received the same equal information.
That's great. And then talk to people who maybe have interacted with the CEO. That's really good advice. I think we're going to take one more question. So advice, Susan, do you have any advice for people who are currently searching for jobs, who are struggling with the job market, who are dealing with difficult job searches? Any advice?
Super difficult to say generally. My one go-to trick is, have you branded yourself as the role that you're trying to find, or are you still branded as the role that you have been in? And then are you looking for the same role again somewhere else, or are you looking for a different role? So be aware of how you're branded and whether or not you will be found for what it is you're looking. And then some of the other things that we've discussed, the self-awareness, sort of looking to your own capabilities. We have an exercise that we take candidates through that is exactly that. That really we're asking them to reflect on their careers, and you as marketing and communications professionals are constantly doing that for others, and so you might not do that for yourself as much as you could. And if I want to say that if you do that, you're going to show up as stronger. If you really know yourself, if you can own areas. I have a candidate just recently who owned a weakness and said, I need this on the team. This is not my forte. It's incredibly powerful, actually, because you're more or less saying, I've got everything else. Just this is not me. So I need somebody very, very talented in this particular area. And that's rather like saying sort of, here's who I am dispositionally. So if you've got a CEO who wouldn't get on well with that, we're declaring early that this is not a fit. And then you don't go through the 8 interviews only to get to somebody who says there's no chemistry. Everything else would be specific.
Okay. I think that is helpful. And I know that a lot of people on the call right now are thinking about that. So that's good advice. So Susan, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your expertise, which is absolutely fantastic. So for everybody on the webinar, be sure to check out the Financial Narrative website regularly. There's lots of other great upcoming events in store next month, including a conversation about chat GDP on March 1st, virtual speed networking on March 2nd, and a members breakfast and conversation about ESG communications and on March 7th in New York. And check out the website for details and other upcoming events. And also, if you're not a member yet, we'd love to have you. You can apply on our website, www.financialnarrative.org, on the Explore Membership tab. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, everybody, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and rest of the week.
Thank you so much. Great questions. Thank you.